The air, water, earth, and sun awes us. The four awesome forces of nature can provide 1,000 times more energy than we need. You are also awesome. You and me and all Earthkind are the fifth element. We are literally changing the world. Technology is now harnessing nature's awesome power for electricity, heat, and transportation. And the best news is that the clean energy transition can save us money and create a more prosperous, just, beautiful, and sustainable civilization today. Welcome you guys to the Awesome Earthkind podcast. And if you would, let folks know who you are, where do you live, and what kind of work do you do?
I'll start. My name is Vanessa. I live in Chicago and I work on building neighborhood electric vehicle charging infrastructure that can be accessible and affordable for everyone visiting the neighborhood or living there.
Outstanding. Next.
I'll go. My name is Netta Dalamy. I'm an attorney and EV advocate in Chicago. I work in clean energy policy and advocacy generally, but I focus on transportation policy. And I also do on the side volunteer EV advocacy, which is how I met Vanessa, and co-founded a EV owners group called Chicago for EVs. And we do outreach and advocacy in the Chicagoland area.
Great. And Sam?
I'm Samantha Bingham. I'm the coordinator for the Chicago Area Clean Cities Coalition. I've been a lifelong Chicagoan. The Clean Cities program is a Department of Energy program that reduces the transportation sector's dependence on petroleum. And so here it's important for us to do that because we want to improve the quality of life for Chicago area residents by improving their air quality and addressing climate change.
Outstanding. Well, thank you guys for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. We like to start out with an inspirational quote, or we call it a quantum quote, that helps frame the conversation and gives people a perspective about where you're coming from. So would one of you care to share?
Sure. I'll share a quantum quote to get us started. Since we're talking about clean energy and sustainable transportation, Tesla is a famous person in this space. And one quote he says is, "I don't care that they stole my idea. I care that they don't have any of their own." And I think that just speaks to how, we can solve problems if we work together and work creatively and collaboratively. And I think the ladies on the podcast with me have a lot of great ideas that they make happen. So wanted to quote Tesla along those lines.
Excellent. Outstanding. Well, we like to start, ladies, with why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Who would like to take it from there?
I'll go first. This is Vanessa. I experienced firsthand the benefits of driving an electric vehicle used when I moved to Chicago and had to have one for work. I also was a renter living in a multifamily building and saw that with all my student loans, I could drive sustainably at zero emissions, reduce air pollution, and also realize a lot of the cost savings from having an electric car for when I had to do work visits. But I struggled to find available charging options that were affordable around the city, and noticed there was it was disconnected where certain neighborhoods had public charging, other neighborhoods didn't. And so that launched me into researching a way that we could, researching the need and also different models that we could boost infrastructure accessible to everyone so that other people could experience the benefits of driving an EV, both used and new. I'll popcorn it over to Netta.
Yeah, I had a really similar experience too. I've had an EV since 2017. And I found that a lot of the EV owners that I was meeting, the early adopters, did not have a similar lifestyle or experience or background from me. They tended to be older white men from the suburbs. They owned homes, they had garages and driveways where they could charge, and they didn't understand the reliance that people like Vanessa and I had on public chargers. And so the experiences and challenges that we faced were not really in the conversation that most EV owners had when we were hanging out and talking. And I wanted to use these experiences that I had, along with like the legal training that I was having in law school at the time I was in law school. At the same time, I was also renting. I was in an apartment in the city. And I was someone who knew how to talk about EV charging, knew how to talk about EVs, and I was still having such a difficult time talking to landlords and talking to like my building managers about it. And I was like, if this is so difficult for me, and I'm like a relatively highly educated person and I know what I'm talking about, what is everyone else going to do? What are we going to do in 10 years when we're supposed to have 50-70% of cars be electric? We're screwed. So
Yeah, wow.
And this is Sam. I would just echo what my colleague said, and then add that we've been hearing for years that the purchase price of electric vehicles is going to reach cost parity with internal combustion engine vehicles, and so there's a diminishing incremental cost. And so what the key barrier is going to be is infrastructure and access to infrastructure. And in an urban area like Chicago, 70% of the residents of the city live in multi-unit dwellings. If we want to see EV adoption take root here, we need a robust community solution for charging access.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Well, so what kind of activities do you guys do and promote?
We'll bring it back to me. So one thing with the pandemic, a lot of things we've had to do is virtual. But I think all of us have just met some really lovely fellow Chicagoans, fellow neighbors. I know Sam has a greater reach, and also businesses and policy makers who we've kind of joined this network of folks that really help share information, get the word out, and debunk myths. So I think webinars and virtual meetings and just talking with people has we've still been able to do that during COVID and relatively successfully. So, helping people solve, answer questions and solve some of the challenges they face. So that's one thing I do, is speak on various virtual presentations and talk with folks who are learning about the technology, interested in learning more, refer people to organizations like Sam's, refer folks to Chicago EVs like Netta's organization.
So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Netta, please.
I think the crucial step here, like step 0, I call it, is awareness, just knowing that these cars exist and what they mean, what the difference between a Prius, which is not an electric car, it has an electrified component to it, but what the difference between that and a fully electric car is, a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, all of those things, and the myths, how much does it, how long does it take to charge? How far does it go? All these crucial questions that people have, the 101 of electric vehicles that people want to know before they even think about buying. I think that's the first step before you go any further.
So step 0 is education and understanding the difference between a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid electric, and an all-electric vehicle, and how far they go, and et cetera. But then you guys were mentioning that part of the key issue in urban areas in particular are these electric vehicle charging station deserts, where there's no charging, and especially low and moderate income communities. So what kind of solutions are you promoting for those areas?
So I'll just jump in. There's a lot of really exciting policy that I think all of us have tried to advocate for that are going to help solve some of those issues with charging deserts. Illinois just passed the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. There's also going to be one thing I know is being discussed is EV readiness ordinances. Chicago just passed that. Hopefully we'll see that across other municipalities. And so I think, advocating for the right policy, and then supporting, in general, just building of infrastructure, whatever we can do to help get infrastructure built, whether it's connecting someone to a contractor or teaching folks. Like, I direct a lot of people to Clean Cities Coalition in Chicago to, learn more about what hosting a charger is like, and different types of technology to consider, because they have excellent resources. And then I've been working on a small project where we are building privately owned level 2 charging stations that can be owned by the host on a small commercial site in a neighborhood and rented out to the general public. So it's a way to almost Airbnb a charger.
Great, fantastic. So policy, laws and regulations, I guess, is that, they got that part right, or?
Yeah, I think Nana and Sam, I know you're very active in writing the policy right now.
Yeah, so Chicago passed the EV readiness ordinance in 2020, and that just basically means that we're building buildings as we obviously move into the future. And the idea is that if EVs are going to be increasing adoption of our vehicles, then the buildings that we are building should be ready for the charging of those. Since most people charge at home or at work, the wiring that is going into those buildings should support them. New buildings, ideally, I think for equity reasons, renovated buildings should be included in them. The Chicago law doesn't include that right now. I wrote a bill on the state level that is being considered right now that would include new and renovated buildings, that would recommend requirements for parking spaces dependent on the number of parking spaces, how many of those spaces would be EV ready. And there is different suggestions based on whether that parking space would be ready for a charger to be installed versus capable, EV capable, being a little bit of like a technical term for electrician wonky term for how much extra insulation would be required, like having an outlet there or not. But basically the circuit ways and the wiring, the capacity is there in the building such that later on, when more people have EVs and they want to charge their vehicles at home or work, we're not going to be having to dig up concrete and spend tens of thousands of dollars, which is what the most expensive part of retrofitting right now is. We can save those costs and we can invest in it now and not have to spend more later.
Fantastic. And then if you would talk a little bit about these private solutions that you're promoting. How does that work, Vanessa?
Oh, Vanessa. So this is a pilot, just having done some research as the used EV driver and multifamily, needing something near my house to charge overnight. I have collected a lot of survey results from little neighborhood sites that have spaces to dedicate for EV charging and can sacrifice a parking space that they could potentially put a level 2 EV charger in. And so with this research, we were able to map out that there's a ton of people who are, small commercial buildings in neighborhoods that don't have public charging options, that are excited about the idea of having infrastructure as an amenity for their community, not trying to make money from it necessarily, but just being able to recover their electricity costs and being able to know that they're supporting their neighbors in having affording charging solution near people's homes. So I was able to take this research and collaborate with a really cool startup called EV Match to deploy. We did I can't remember, it was 5 or 6 community chargers, level 2 chargers in Chicago neighborhoods that didn't have a ton of public charging options, with a grant from the Keeling Curve Prize this year. And we're seeing, sure, like they're not being used every day yet, but over time, we see over 6 months, people find the chargers, start using them. And sometimes people do overnight charging. And that's exactly what we wanted to do by planting these little charging stations in neighborhoods. So that's just a kind of like a private solution that can be leveraged for public usage.
Yeah, it's great. It's fantastic. And so there's some grants, it sounds like, to do that. And then there's a cost for people to charge, but it's not exorbitant, it sounds like. So
yeah, a lot of places in Chicago might have chargers, but maybe they're only for the business, or maybe they're full inexpensive parking garages downtown where it's free to charge, but you have to pay $20 to enter. And just in my experience, I definitely relied on the public chargers that weren't in those garages that were installed by, I know some of the work Sam did in the past. And so just having those neighborhood stations are really helpful if they're near your home and in a safe place at a safe kilowatt hour rate, or affordable kilowatt hour rate.
Yeah, great.
And this is Sam. I wanted to just jump in and talk
Please.
about the funding that's upcoming. So
Mhm.
there's a large amount of federal funding being directed towards EV infrastructure via a formulaic allocation of US DOT funds that'll come to the state. So that's more than $100 million that the state of Illinois will have for public charging infrastructure. That's on top of Volkswagen mitigation trust funding that they already have, in addition to $70 million in capital funding that they have for chargers. And that's not even talking about the community charging funding that the infrastructure bill, the federal infrastructure bill, is allocating to competitive grants. And so those federal funds, at a minimum, 40% are being steered to communities that have been disadvantaged or are overburdened, either by pollution or energy costs. And so the work that Vanessa and Netta are doing is instrumental in working on the ground to get community input and feedback on what e-mobility looks like in their community. Because as we were talking about EV charging deserts, like you're not solving the issue if you're just saying, oh, we're going to fund a charger here so we fill a gap. Communities should be involved in understanding what e-mobility is and what the opportunity is for their community, that these chargers are not being built for gentrification purposes, that they're not intended to be for others passing through their community, that they are a resource and an opportunity for the community to have a lower cost of transportation modes. But once again, like cars are still cars. Cars still have an environmental footprint. And so, we want to also, talk to communities about other e-mobility modes that, can be supported with community input and buy-in and what infrastructure might be needed.
And so some of those e-mobility alternatives are, if you would.
Sure. So micro-mobility options such as electric scooters, your bike share programs, seeing a lot of success with electric bike share here in Chicago. And then electric transit. The L here in Chicago already is electrified, but there's a program in place to electrify the Chicago Transit Authority bus system by 2040. So, it, and even the shared economy. So, not everyone wants to or can afford a car. So if there are mechanisms to ensure that there are shared vehicles, such as car sharing, either provided through a not-for-profit or a for-profit entity, those current systems don't serve everyone in the region nor even in the city of Chicago. So how can those shared resources, such as car sharing, be brought to more neighborhoods as part of the implementation of these e-mobility goals that the federal government has, as well as the state locally?
Neat. Cool. Great. So what do you guys see the forces that are driving community EV charging? Now, you mentioned some of them, but just to be clear.
I think this division, start over. I think segregation is a big one. I think of the forces that Sam was just mentioning about how transit doesn't fit everyone's life. Car ownership doesn't fit everyone's life. There's no one solution that's going to fix everything. It's not going to fix climate change, but it's also not going to fix the problems that personal transportation needs of every family as well. On one hand, we have neighborhoods of Chicago that are very wealthy and very white and have very good access to transit, and that's great for them, and they're walkable and bikeable. That's not where I grew up, certainly, and so you needed a car to get around in my neighborhood. And so for those areas, if you need a car to get around, you're going to need a charger to get around. If you live in an apartment in those areas, you're going to need a charger and charging infrastructure in those areas. And the advocates that are advocating for, the walkability and bike lanes and things like that need to understand those sensitivities. At the same time, when we are trying to advocate for EV ownership, I think we can't write off entire areas and neighborhoods of the city just because they don't already exist there. I think there can be some criticism of installing chargers in areas where there might be lower income or minorities because, well, poor people don't want EVs because they don't have them. And it's very circular logic. It's kind of writing off entire groups of people because they don't have them now. It makes no sense. And I think that because they don't have them is exactly a good reason that we should be encouraging more incentives. And it's exactly the people, as Sam mentioned, for pollution reasons, should be benefiting from the most, and we should be encouraging the most. Anyone could go ahead. I lost my train of thought.
I was going to also say pollution, and just people are really seeing that the effects also, I mean, aside, in addition to everything you said, like, you know, lower income areas are going to, or lower income in general, poor people, especially in the US, which are in urban areas, often are going to experience worse effects of climate change. And so I think sustainable transportation is a huge chunk of our emissions. And, you know, if we can get the most bang for our buck, let's put it in the communities that can benefit from it the most. And, you know, Chicago has a history of environmental pollution. It's an industrial city. And so I think thinking of what, I think a lot of communities are excited about the potential for sustainable transportation, you know, whether it's shared micromobility, e-mobility, public electric buses, and we want to see it actually happen and happen where we really need it.
So how do you see this all evolving? What do you see as the kind of the outcomes that you guys are going to see evolve?
I think there's a lot of potential happening with more incentives. So with this Climate and Equitable Jobs Act that Vanessa mentioned that passed this past year, there are incentives and rebates going into effect this coming July. $4,000 off the purchase of new or used EV in Illinois. I think that's going to really increase the duck curve of EV adoption. And we're going to see a lot more in Illinois happening very quickly. And we're going to need a lot more chargers before we even know it. Us four know them, right? We know that we need chargers, but people are going to need them very soon. And it's going to, I think, encourage a lot of fire under a lot of public officials' butts about what we need to do. I'm very excited about the fact that since I started doing this, since I got an EV just like less than 5 years ago, I've seen a very quick growth in the excitement and just interest in this topic. Sam's shaking her head that like we met that time period and I was like, no one cares about this. And now everyone cares about this. So that's pretty exciting to see, like on the national debate stage last year, 2 years ago, God, for the president, like Joe Biden saying we need to have 500,000 charging stations, like that blew my mind that was a national debate topic, the electric vehicles doing that. So that's what makes me excited and like what I'm looking forward to.
Great. So what challenges have you guys encountered and what kind of lessons have you learned and what are you doing differently now than you started out doing?
I would say that a challenge. So we had so in 2018 and 2019, Clean Cities, with the support of stakeholders, was able to hold electric vehicle ride-in drives at the Chicago Auto Show. And we thought we were going to have thousands of people test drive EVs, and found out that it was tough. It was tough to pull people who are there to see the new vehicles. It was tough to pull them aside and engage them on electric vehicles and get them to test drive. And so there's a lot of naysayers, and I think like a lesson learned is to drill deeper into why naysayers are naysaying. What preconceived perception do they have about electrification, and not just assume they're their gearheads, or it's just not going to work out for them, because EVs, with the ranges available, and more infrastructure coming, and definitely in Chicago, like 40%, or 90% of our trips are 40 miles or less. It's well within the range of even a lower mileage EV. So, to just keep drilling into why people are naysayers, to keep doing that education and outreach. And it is daunting, to keep repeating yourself about this, but we keep the mission is never accomplished. We keep needing to engage more and more groups about the benefits of electric vehicles, and why infrastructure is important, why they should host chargers, why fleets and why individuals should purchase, or look into converting to an electric vehicle, because it's there's a lot of pushback in the marketplace still.
I will say I was at those auto show events volunteering, and one of the best ways to get people to come was I asked them if they liked paying for gas. That got their attention. And when I do one-on-one presentations around in different communities, one of my favorite tidbits is talking about the efficiency between gas engines and electric motors, because gas engines are really not efficient. And I love telling people that when they buy $40 worth of gas, $8 of it is actually moving the car, and $32 is just being set on fire.
Wow.
It's my favorite.
Pretty incredible, right? Yeah, that's awesome. So would you consider that one of your unique value supernovas, the thing that's most people don't know, but they really should? Do you have
I
any
think
others?
it's one of the things that, if you're not, one of the less common, I think, for people who are passionate about EVs is, it saves the earth and less emissions and pollution and all that. But a lot of things that I've learned, especially going outside of Chicago, further into the suburbs, I've done presentations in Southern Illinois in very rural areas. People want to know how this is going to affect their wallets. It's how it's going to affect their families. Like, am I going to save money on this? And the answer is yes. Like, you are going to save money. Also, it's going to help, like, you're not going to poison your kids if you want to turn on your car in your garage. That's also a plus, but you are going to save money. You're going to save on gas. You're not going to spend money on gas. There's much less maintenance. You're never going to have to worry about an oil change again. And overall, the total cost of ownership is much, much lower than any gas car you could ever have. And those are pluses that I think everyone should hear about, regardless of how you feel about saving the environment.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've built my career around the fact that to be truly sustainable, we got to save people money at the same time that we're having a positive environmental impact. Because while some of us may be able to afford to pay more for certain things, in the long run, if we're not saving people money, it's just not going to catch on. It's not going to be a sustainable kind of thing. And I think that's one of the great things about electric vehicles, like you're saying. I mean, you're looking at prices per mile that are a half to 2/3 less with an electric vehicle compared to a gas vehicle, depending upon where you live and your price of electricity. But price of gas is just so expensive, and the inefficiency of gas vehicles is so, as you've quoted, just so inefficient. So it makes it really, really a tremendous benefit, especially when you look at the total cost of ownership and the fact that you don't have any oil changes or transmission fluids and 20 moving parts instead of 2,000 to break down. So yeah, tremendous ownership, tremendous possibility. So thank you. All right. Would you, one of you guys or all you guys, tell us your big aha moment that when something like was happening and you just like sort of realized this is the solutions, this is the answer. I think you shared a little bit, but anyone pop to mind there, guys?
I mean, if you've never ridden in an electric car, go do it. They're really fun. And so the first time when we actually started like test driving them, just like a used 2016 Leaf, boy, is that easier to drive, more fun to drive. Like, I know people were like, oh, Teslas are so fun, but like EVs are fun. You accelerate in seconds. They're quiet. Maybe it's not just the Leaf, but great turning radius. And just perfect for our, if there's just a little more, at least for me, a little more charging infrastructure around the city, like, man, we saved so much money. Even like used, it's barely depreciated. So that was an aha. Was my first ride and drive.
Yeah, I mean, 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds for just about any electric vehicle. It's pretty amazing, right? So, as somebody quoted, was the performance of a Porsche for the price of a Buick or Toyota or whatever. So, yeah, pretty incredible stuff. All torque, right? So it's amazing. So fantastic. Any other big ahas you guys got that you want to share?
I guess for me, I would just add, you know, we had a project with some wheelchair accessible compressed natural gas taxis about a decade ago, and actually heard from a gentleman who is confined to a wheelchair, who was in Chicago for his wife had a conference, and his wife was at the conference, but they were they came into O'Hare. They were picked up in a wheelchair accessible CNG vehicle, and they were both ecstatic about the green option for a wheelchair vehicle mobility. And so the gentleman felt so great about having access to a green vehicle that while his wife was at the conference, he traveled all across the city in this clean vehicle that was able to transport him safely and cleanly. And so just thinking about like where market forces aren't going to address first, thinking about everyone when we're talking about policy solutions. So something to make sure that there are there's diversity in the people at the table when planning a program, a policy, a project, because these perspectives are important. And so that that is why with the EV readiness policy, or the EV readiness ordinance that Netta mentioned, there are requirements in there to serve handicap accessible parking spaces with electric vehicle chargers. So to think about everyone in a community, not just not the least common denominator, or where the market is moving first.
Excellent. All right. For some reason, my microphone just shifted. Hold on one moment. Not quite sure what happened there. Oh, no. Well, we'll keep it going. So what are you guys most energized about today? And we'll take each of you in turn. So Vanessa, then Netta, and then Sam. Vanessa, what are you most energized about?
I'm just excited about the fact that EVs are also mobile batteries. So, my family is always going through power shutoffs in California with the fires. And so one of my aunts is very into the idea and looking into getting an EV that can also work as a backup battery for her house.
Yeah, it's really a great point, right? So, yep, these are
So
mobile
grid
power
resilient.
stations. Mobile power stations. Awesome. All right, Netta.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to say something else, but I think a lot of the benefits that we can get from EVs that we're noticing now is like the grid becomes more renewable, like stabilization of the grid, lowering prices for everyone, regardless of if you own an EV or not. I think a lot about Texas during that ice storm, and I think like that's related to your story, Vanessa. But and also passing my bill. I'd like to do that.
Excellent. Sam.
Yeah, I am super energized about leadership here in Illinois on electric transportation. We have activities going on at the statewide level and at the local level that are just, all hands on deck supporting the electrification of everything from light duty passenger vehicles to, mitigating diesel emissions through electric trucks and buses. So we have the utilities engaged, the state government, local, the municipal governments. It's all hands on deck. Excited to see what we can do and leverage some of this federal funding in the next couple of years.
Excellent. Outstanding. All right. Piece of parting advice and the best way for folks to get a hold of you guys. So let's take it. We'll start with Sam and then go to Netta and then wind up with Vanessa this time.
Yeah, best way to reach me is sam@chicagocleancities.org.
Parting advice, Sam? Anything for folks to think about that you think are most important?
Get your butt in the seat of an EV. It'll change your life.
Excellent. Netta.
Well, I have a foreign name, so I'm not going to spell it out for you, but I'm sure it can be provided somewhere in my email. But my parting advice would be to listen to the people who have frontline experiences with the environmental issues that you're trying to advocate for.
And everybody's contact information will be in the show notes. So folks, so if you're listening to this and you want to get a hold of folks, their emails will be in the show notes. Just click on it. And Vanessa.
You can reach me at communitycharging@gmail.com is our project with the community charging pilot in Chicago. And parting advice, I'd say I invest in Illinois for what we're doing with electric transportation and beneficial electrification in general.
Outstanding.
Keep your eye on us.
Outstanding. Anything you guys wanted to touch on that we didn't get to?
Go to a ride and drive event if there's one in your area.
There you go.
Or go test
Ride and
drive.
drive.
Just drive it in there. Go test drive.
Just go get test drive. Awesome. Fantastic. Well, ladies, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. Wonderful meeting you and listening to all your great work and looking to see wonderful things to come in 2022 and beyond. So thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ron.
Nice talking with you guys. Bye.
Thank you for joining us today, awesome Earthkind people. Do you want to increase your climate impact by a factor of 1,000? Then pick up your phone today and call your United States congressional representative and both your U.S. senators and ask them to support the federal Build Back Better bill. Build Back Better will create the largest climate protection action in American history. Because so few people take the time and make the effort, our elected representatives interpret the opinion of everyone who calls or writes as representing the views of 1,000 other citizens. Congress will vote on the Build Back Better bill that aims to get our country to 80% pollution-free electricity by 2030 and cut climate pollution 100% by 2050. The Build Back Better bill provides tax incentives for solar, wind, energy efficiency, electric cars, charging stations, and more. And it will finally cut the subsidies for fossil fuels. It will also drive major investments into communities that have been disproportionately hit by environmental injustice. When you make the calls, spread the word via social media by posting images of a large red exclamation point using the hashtags #CodeRedClimate and #CodeRedCongress. You'll be joining some of your favorite musicians and celebrities, including the Dave Matthews Band, Dead and Companies, Billie Eilish, Melissa Eldridge, Phineas, Maroon 5, Brittany Howard, John Baptiste, Alex Benjamin, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jane Fonda, Mark Ruffalo, Damien and Stephen Marley, Group Love, Huey Lewis and the News, and many more. When the Build Back Better bill passes, the United States can enter the global climate negotiations on November 1st, with America setting out to cut climate pollution 100% by 2050 and be able to encourage other nations to do the same. If not you, then who? The time is now. Act now. Pick up the phone, call your congressional representatives and U.S. senators, and help create a better future for our children and all the 7 billion Earthkind people on the planet. Thank you.